If this reached you before 2026, it is not accidental, and it is not late. It means the timeline you will experience next year is still being selected. The fact that you are aware of this now is not random information arriving to a passive mind. Awareness itself is evidence that you are standing inside the selection window. Time does not work the way you were taught. The future is not a fixed location waiting for you to arrive. It is a field of possible outcomes responding to consciousness in the present. When awareness touches a possibility, that possibility becomes available. When awareness does not, it collapses unnoticed. This is not about effort or preparation. It is about proximity. And awareness is proximity. If the next year were already locked, this message would not resonate. You would scroll past it, dismiss it, or never encounter it at all. The field only presents information that matches your current state. So the timing of this is the message. You are not being warned. You are being informed that the choice is still live. Most people assume timelines are chosen through decisions, plans, or actions. They believe the future responds to what they do. But reality does not mirror behavior. It mirrors state. It mirrors identity. It mirrors the emotional and energetic posture you are occupying right now. This is why two people can take identical actions and end up in completely different realities. The action was never the deciding factor. The state behind it was. The reason this moment matters is not because 2026 is approaching on a calendar. It matters because the present is the only point at which selection happens. The field does not wait for January. It responds now. Every moment you remain unaware, the default trajectory continues. Every moment you recognize what is happening, new trajectories become accessible. This is not pressure. There is no urgency here. Urgency would signal lack. Calm recognition signals alignment. You do not need to force a better year into existence. You need to understand that the year you experience is a reflection of who you are being as this message lands. The mirror is already active. You are not a small person hoping to influence a large external system. You are consciousness itself encountering its own options. The field is not separate from you. It is responsive to you. And responsiveness only activates when awareness is present. This is why recognition changes everything. The moment you see that the timeline is not locked, you stop waiting. You stop bracing. You stop preparing for impact. You begin relating to the future as something that responds rather than arrives. And that shift alone alters the selection. If you feel a quiet sense of clarity instead of excitement, that is alignment. If you feel steadiness instead of urgency, that is coherence. The field does not require drama. It requires presence. If you want to remain within this frequency as the selection continues, subscribe now and stay connected to this state of recognition. The future is not a point you are moving toward. It is not waiting at the end of a sequence of days. It is not something you eventually reach through effort, planning, or time passing. The future exists around you now, as a field of simultaneous possibilities, already formed, already available, already responsive. What changes is not where you are in time. What changes is what you are tuned to. The idea that time moves forward creates the illusion of distance. Distance creates waiting. Waiting creates tension. And tension signals to the field that you believe what you want is separate from you. That belief alone collapses access. Not because the future is withheld, but because you are tuned to absence instead of availability. Reality does not operate on progression. It operates on resonance. You do not travel into a future. You match one. Just as a radio does not move closer to a station to hear it more clearly, you do not move closer to a timeline to experience it. You adjust the frequency you are receiving on. The station was always there. This is why effort often feels like pushing against something invisible. You are trying to advance through space and time toward an outcome that is not located there. The future you want is not ahead of you. It is beside you, overlapping this moment, waiting for coherence. When coherence is present, the overlap becomes lived experience. When it is not, the timeline remains theoretical. The sense that something is far away is not about time. It is about mismatch. When your inner state does not match a probability, you experience it as distant. When your inner state aligns, it feels immediate, natural, even obvious. This is why some changes happen suddenly after long periods of stagnation. The timeline did not move closer. You moved into resonance. Understanding this dissolves impatience. There is no rush because there is no gap to cross. There is only tuning. And tuning does not require force. It requires awareness. It requires noticing the state you are inhabiting right now and recognizing whether it matches what you intend to experience. When you stop trying to get to the future stops resisting you. Resistance was never external. It was created by the assumption of distance. The moment you relate to outcomes as present potentials instead of distant goals, your nervous system relaxes. That relaxation is not passive. It is precise. It signals trust. And trust is alignment. This also explains why imagining the future sometimes feels heavy. You are projecting yourself forward while remaining anchored in a state that does not match what you are imagining. That split creates friction. The solution is not better visualization. The solution is state coherence. When who you are now matches what you are imagining, imagination dissolves into recognition. You are not late. You are not early. You are exactly where selection occurs. The present moment is not a waiting room. It is the control center. Not control through force, but through alignment. Every moment you spend trying to move forward is a moment you are not tuning correctly. Every moment you rest into presence, you adjust the dial. The future does not come closer with time. It becomes visible with coherence. When you understand that it is already around you, the chase ends. And when the chase ends, the matching begins. If you have been sensing pressure as the year approaches, it is not because something bad is coming. It is because something unresolved is still available. Pressure is not a warning. It is feedback. It appears when multiple timelines are still open and your system is registering the difference between them before your mind can explain it. Emotion always arrives before logic. The body and the nervous system are not limited to linear time. They are responsive to probability. When a future is not yet selected, the emotional field begins to register the tension between what is currently familiar and what is possible. That tension is felt as heaviness, anticipation, restlessness, or an unplaceable sense that something is shifting. This is not anxiety in the clinical sense. It is sensitivity to an undecided field. Most people misinterpret this sensation. They assume something is wrong with them. They try to calm it down, distract from it, or analyze it away. But suppression does not dissolve the signal. It only delays understanding. Emotion is not noise in the system. It is the system's earliest form of communication. The pressure you feel is not coming from the future. It is coming from the present moment encountering multiple potential outcomes at once. When one timeline is dominant, the emotional field feels steady, even if circumstances are challenging. When several timelines are competing, the field feels charged. That charge is not meant to be endured. It is meant to be read. This is why the sensation often has no clear story attached to it. The mind wants reasons. The emotional field offers information. When you try to force the feeling into a narrative, it becomes heavier. When you allow it to be what it is, it begins to clarify. Emotion does not want explanation. It wants recognition. There is also a subtle difference between fear and pressure that is often overlooked. Fear contracts and points backward, toward protection and avoidance. Pressure points forward, toward selection. It feels like being held at the edge of something not yet named. If you slow down enough to feel it without labeling it, you will notice that it is not hostile. It is directive. This sensation arises because your system knows that the window is still open. When a timeline is locked, the emotional field quiets. When choice is active, sensation increases. The discomfort comes not from danger, but from indecision. Not conscious indecision, but energetic indecision. The field is waiting for coherence. Trying to escape the pressure keeps you oscillating between options. Trying to solve it mentally adds noise. The pressure eases when you stop treating it as a problem and start relating to it as information. Information about what no longer fits. Information about what is still forming. Information about the fact that something is asking to be met consciously. This is not the moment to rush into decisions or to brace for impact. That would turn guidance into resistance. This is the moment to become present with what is being signaled without trying to force clarity prematurely. Clarity emerges when the signal is allowed, not when it is interrogated. The emotional field is not demanding action yet. It is asking for awareness. When awareness arrives, the pressure begins to organize. And when it organizes, it no longer feels heavy. It feels directional. That is how you know the field has been heard. There is a misunderstanding at the center of how most people relate to reality, and it quietly undermines their efforts. The field does not respond to what you say you want. It does not respond to plans, affirmations, or carefully constructed intentions. It responds to the state you are inhabiting while those intentions are formed. State is the signal. Everything else is commentary. Intention without alignment creates friction. You can feel this when you try to think your way into a different outcome while your body remains tense, rushed, or doubtful. The words may sound correct, but the field does not register words. It registers coherence. When intention is layered on top of misalignment, the result is resistance. Not as punishment, but as feedback. The system is showing you that the signal is mixed. State is the emotional and energetic posture you are holding right now. It is the difference between wanting relief and already feeling relieved. Between hoping for stability and resting in steadiness. Between trying to be confident and quietly knowing you are supported. The field mirrors this posture instantly, even if physical circumstances take time to reorganize. This is why effort often produces exhaustion instead of movement. You are attempting to override state with will. Will is loud. State is quiet. The field responds to the quiet signal, not the loud one. When the two conflict, the louder one loses. This is not because effort is wrong, but because effort used to compensate for mistrust amplifies incoherence. Coherence creates movement without strain. When your internal state matches the outcome you are oriented toward, action becomes obvious and efficient. You stop pushing. You start responding. The same steps that once felt heavy begin to feel natural. This is not motivation. It is alignment. And alignment is detectable long before results appear. Many people attempt to use intention as a way to escape their current state. They say they want abundance while feeling lack. They say they want peace while feeling rushed. They say they want clarity while resisting uncertainty. The field does not respond to the desire to escape. It responds to the willingness to be present. Present stabilizes state. Stable state reorganizes reality. This is also why repeating intentions without changing state eventually feels hollow. The words lose charge. Frustration builds. Doubt creeps in. Not because intention is ineffective, but because repetition without alignment trains the nervous system to associate desire with effort instead of ease. That association becomes the signal. When you shift state, intention becomes secondary. You do not need to convince reality of anything. Reality is already listening. The moment you settle into coherence, the field begins to rearrange. Often subtly at first. Often invisibly. But consistently. Movement follows state the way a shadow follows form. If this distinction is landing clearly for you, Take a moment to like the video now as a simple confirmation that recognition has occurred. Recognition is not passive. It is participatory. The most powerful intentions are not spoken. They are embodied. They feel calm. They feel ordinary. They feel unremarkable. And that is precisely why they work. The field does not respond to intensity. It responds to stability. When you stop trying to get reality to listen, and instead listen to your own state, coherence becomes available. From coherence, movement is inevitable. Not forced. Not delayed. Just natural. Emotion is not a reaction to reality. It is the instruction reality responds to. Long before the mind interprets events, the emotional field has already signaled the direction of alignment or misalignment. This is not poetic language. It is functional. Emotion is frequency. Frequency is selection. Every moment, you are broadcasting an emotional posture. Not what you say you feel, but what your system is actually holding. The field does not sort these signals into good or bad. It simply mirrors them. Expansion is read as availability. Contraction is read as resistance. That is the entire mechanism. Expansion feels like ease, openness, curiosity, calm clarity, or quiet confidence. It does not have to be excitement. It often isn't. Contraction feels like urgency, tightness, frustration, heaviness, or the sense of bracing against something. These sensations are not obstacles. They are feedback. Immediate, precise, and neutral. When you experience expansion, the field reads it as permission. Permission for movement. Permission for synchronization. Permission for timelines that match that openness to come forward. When you experience contraction, the field reads it as a signal that something is being resisted or controlled. The response is not punishment. The response is stabilization of the familiar. This is how timelines are selected without conscious effort. You do not wake up and choose a future with your thoughts. You drift into one through emotional consistency. The emotional posture you rehearse becomes the environment you live in. Not because emotion creates events directly, but because it determines which events you are available to perceive, respond to, and follow through on. Many people attempt to override emotion with logic. They tell themselves they should feel differently. They try to replace contraction with positive thinking. But the field does not respond to edited signals. It responds to authentic ones. Pretended expansion registers as noise. Suppressed contraction registers as resistance. Neither produces alignment. The role of emotion is not to be fixed. It is to be listened to. Expansion does not mean you are correct. Contraction does not mean you are wrong. Expansion means you are in resonance with a probability. Contraction means you are out of sync with one. That is all. The message is simple when it is not argued with. This is also why repeating behaviors without changing emotional posture leads to repetition of outcomes. You can change circumstances, relationships, locations, even goals, and still end up in the same pattern. The pattern was not in the situation. It was in the emotional signal being broadcast. The field simply kept matching it. When you allow emotion to be what it is without forcing it to justify itself, something shifts. Contraction softens when it is acknowledged. Expansion stabilizes when it is trusted. You stop oscillating. And when oscillation stops, the signal becomes clear. Clear signals produce coherent responses. Emotion is not something happening to you. It is something happening through you. It is not a reaction to the future. It is the mechanism selecting it. The field does not wait for certainty. It responds to consistency. Whatever emotional state you consistently inhabit becomes the path of least resistance. This is not about feeling good all the time. That would be another form of control. It is about noticing what expands and what contracts and respecting that information. Respect creates coherence. Coherence creates movement. When you understand that emotion is instruction, you stop fighting yourself. And when you stop fighting yourself, the field no longer has to mirror that conflict. Control is not strength. It is a signal. Every time you tighten, rush, overplan, or attempt to force an outcome, you are broadcasting a single message to the field: I do not trust what is already in motion. The field responds to that message precisely. It stabilizes what is familiar and slows what you are trying to accelerate. Force feels active, but energetically it is defensive. It arises when you believe something must be managed or constrained to be safe. Urgency carries the same signature. When you feel rushed to decide, to fix, to act, the pressure is not coming from the situation. It is coming from mistrust. Mistrust that if you relax, things will fall apart. Mistrust that allowing would mean losing control. The field reads that mistrust clearly. Not as a moral failing, but as a request for containment. When mistrust is present, the field limits variability. It reduces surprise. It keeps you inside predictable parameters. This is why forcing often produces stagnation. You are asking the system to keep things manageable while simultaneously demanding change. Those requests conflict. Allowing is often misunderstood as passivity. It is not. Allowing is precision. It is the ability to hold a steady internal state without interfering with what is organizing naturally. Where control compresses possibilities, allowing expands them. Where urgency scrambles signals, allowing clarifies them. You can feel the difference in your body. Control tightens the jaw, the chest, the breath. Allowing softens without collapsing. It feels alert but unstrained. This state communicates trust. Trust does not mean blind faith. It means coherence. It means your system is not bracing against life. Many people believe they must control because they are afraid of unwanted outcomes. But control does not prevent what you fear. It often attracts it. When you fixate on avoiding a result, your attention stays tuned to it. The field responds to attention, not preference. Allowing removes fixation. It frees attention to move. This is why the most effective actions often arise when you stop trying to force clarity. When you allow the moment to be what it is, information surfaces. Options reorganize. Timing becomes obvious. Action taken from allowing feels clean. Action taken from control feels heavy, even when it works temporarily. Allowing does not mean doing nothing. It means doing what is aligned instead of what is reactive. It means responding instead of bracing. It means recognizing that you do not need to micromanage reality for it to function. The field is not chaotic. It is responsive. When you stop interfering, its responsiveness becomes visible. Control is a habit, not a necessity. It was learned during moments when safety felt uncertain. You do not need to judge it or fight it. You only need to notice it. Noticing is enough to loosen it. When control loosens, allowing appears naturally. You do not have to practice it. You have to stop resisting it. If you recognize this pattern in yourself, pause here and comment with the words, "I allow clarity," to anchor this shift consciously. Naming recognition stabilizes it. Allowing is not giving up your power. It is returning it to its proper place. When you trust the field no longer needs to slow you down. It can move with you. Effort has been misunderstood for a long time. It has been treated as proof of seriousness, commitment, and worthiness. But effort, when it comes from forcing, does not expand reality. It compresses it. Forcing narrows the field because it signals that only a limited range of outcomes feels acceptable. The field responds by limiting variation accordingly. When you force, you are attempting to collapse uncertainty prematurely. You want resolution now, clarity now, movement now. That demand creates pressure. Pressure does not speed things up. It restricts options. It tells the field to reduce complexity so it can be managed. What you receive in return is a smaller version of what was possible. This is why forcing often produces results that technically work but feel unsatisfying. You may get movement, but it is constrained. You may get progress, but it lacks ease. The outcome fits the narrow channel you allowed for, not the wider spectrum that was available. The field complied with your request for control by removing surprise. Ease, by contrast, is not laziness. Ease is alignment. When something feels easeful, it is not because you are avoiding effort. It is because resistance has been removed. Resistance is what drains energy, not action. Action taken from alignment feels light even when it is substantial. Forcing is rooted in fear of missing out, fear of falling behind, fear of not being ready in time. These fears are understandable, but they distort perception. They make it seem as though there is only one correct path and a shrinking window to access it. The field responds to that perception by reinforcing limitation. Not as punishment, but as reflection. When you allow instead of force, you are not relinquishing direction. You are relinquishing interference. You are letting the field organize details that do not require micromanagement. This frees your attention to notice openings you could not see while straining. Ease is the signal that the field recognizes. It reads ease as confidence without arrogance. Ease says, this outcome is not being chased because it is already available. That signal widens the range of supportive coincidences, intuitive nudges, and timely responses. Things begin to line up not because you worked harder, but because you stopped compressing the channel. This does not mean you never apply effort. It means effort becomes responsive rather than compulsive. You act when action feels clear, not when anxiety demands movement. You pause when pausing feels stabilizing, not when avoidance takes over. This kind of effort does not collapse possibility. It navigates it. You can feel when forcing is happening. The body tightens. The mind loops. The sense of urgency increases even as clarity decreases. Ease feels different. It feels quiet. It feels obvious. It does not need justification. When you follow ease, you are not gambling. You are aligning. Forcing is often an attempt to outrun discomfort. But discomfort carries information. When you force past it, you miss the message and repeat the pattern later. When you allow, discomfort resolves into clarity. The timeline adjusts without compression. Possibility expands when you stop insisting on how things must unfold. The field is capable of far more coordination than the mind can imagine. When you stop collapsing the range of outcomes through effortful control, you give reality room to respond creatively. Ease is not the absence of challenge. It is the absence of resistance. And where resistance ends, possibility opens. Contrast has been misunderstood as failure, punishment, or misalignment. But contrast is not a mistake in the process. It is the process refining itself. Contrast appears when the field is clarifying what fits and what does not. It is not a detour. It is calibration. Every time you encounter something you do not want, the field is not working against you. It is showing you the boundary of coherence. Contrast sharpens awareness. It defines preference. Without it, alignment would remain vague. You would not know what expands you because nothing would ever challenge your state. The problem is not contrast. The problem is resistance to contrast. Resistance turns information into friction. When you argue with what is showing up, you lock yourself into the very timeline you are trying to escape. The field mirrors resistance by repeating the signal. Not because it wants you to suffer, but because the message has not been received. Recognition completes contrast. The moment you see an experience for what it is, information rather than indictment, the loop dissolves. Recognition does not require approval. You do not have to like what is happening. You only have to see it clearly. Seeing ends repetition. This is why the same patterns repeat for years when they are fought, and dissolve quickly when they are understood. The field does not need you to endure contrast longer than necessary. It only needs acknowledgement. When acknowledgement arrives, the calibration is complete. Contrast refines desire. It strips away vague wanting and replaces it with clarity. Before contrast, you may think you want change in general. After contrast, you know precisely what does not fit. That precision is valuable. It stabilizes the signal you are broadcasting. And stable signals select cleaner timelines. Many people attempt to bypass contrast by staying positive or reframing prematurely. This creates suppression, not alignment. Suppressed contrast does not disappear. It goes underground and re-emerges later, often amplified. The field cannot complete calibration if the signal is denied. Allowing contrast to be felt without interpretation is different. When you allow, you are not resigning yourself to it. You are extracting the information it carries. Once the information is integrated, the contrast has no further function. It dissolves naturally. Resistance keeps you orbiting the same lessons in different forms. Recognition moves you forward without force. Forward not as progress through time, but as refinement of state. Each completed contrast stabilizes identity. Each stabilized identity selects a different range of outcomes. This is why some people seem to move on effortlessly after difficult experiences, while others relive variations of the same struggle. The difference is not strength or intelligence. It is recognition. One sees contrast as a message. The other sees it as a verdict. Contrast is not asking you to suffer more. It is asking you to see more clearly. When clarity arrives, effort is no longer required. The field adjusts automatically. The timeline shifts without announcement. If something keeps appearing in your experience, it is not because you are failing. It is because something is being refined. When you stop resisting the refinement, the process completes. Contrast is the sculptor, not the enemy. It removes what does not belong so what does can remain. When you understand this, contrast loses its threat. It becomes guidance. And guidance, once received, no longer needs to repeat itself. Creation does not happen later. It does not happen after preparation, improvement, or readiness. It happens now, or it does not happen at all. The present moment is not a stepping stone to creation. It is the only point where selection occurs. Everything else is conceptual delay. The belief in preparation is one of the most convincing illusions of time. It feels responsible. It feels mature. It feels like progress. But energetically, preparation often functions as avoidance. It keeps creation safely postponed while the system remains in a familiar state. The field responds to that state by maintaining continuity. Not because it is withholding, but because no new signal has been broadcast. Readiness is not something you arrive at. It is something you decide to embody. Waiting to feel ready implies that the future is responsible for changing you. But creation requires the opposite orientation. The present state selects the future. The future does not prepare the present. This is why so many plans never materialize. They live comfortably in a hypothetical future where risk is minimized and identity remains unchanged. The moment they would need to be lived now, resistance appears. That resistance is not failure. It is information that the current state does not match the imagined outcome. Creation asks one question only: who are you being now? Not who you intend to become. Not who you were. Not who you will be once conditions improve. The field does not extrapolate. It mirrors. The mirror reflects the present. This can feel confronting because it removes excuses. There is no perfect moment arriving. There is no final insight coming that will unlock action. There is only recognition in the present that what you are embodying is what you are selecting. That recognition is not meant to induce pressure. It is meant to return agency. When you shift state now, creation begins now. The external world may reorganize gradually, but the selection is immediate. This is why subtle inner changes often precede visible results by weeks or months. The timeline was chosen long before it became obvious. Preparation can still occur, but it must arise from alignment, not delay. Aligned preparation feels light. It does not promise safety. It expresses coherence. Delayed preparation feels heavy. It postpones exposure. The body knows the difference. This is also why people feel a surge of clarity when they stop waiting. The moment you accept that now is the only point of power, tension releases. There is nothing left to defer. Attention returns to the present. And when attention stabilizes, the signal stabilizes. Creation is not something you do. It is something you allow by aligning with it now. The moment you stop asking when and start noticing how you are being, the field responds. Quietly. Consistently. The present moment is not small. It contains every possible future. Which one unfolds depends entirely on what you are broadcasting now. Not your effort. Not your plans. Your state. When you understand this, waiting loses its appeal. Not because you rush, but because there is nothing to wait for. Creation is already happening. The only question is whether you are present for it. You do not access timelines by moving toward them. You access them by matching them. This is the foundational misunderstanding that keeps people exerting effort where alignment is required. The field does not open pathways in response to pursuit. It reveals pathways when resonance is present. Resonance is the access mechanism. A timeline is not a destination. It is a state-consistent sequence of events. You do not step into it through action alone. Action is secondary. Action is what naturally occurs once matching has happened. When you attempt to act your way into a future that does not match your current state, the action feels strained, repetitive, or ineffective. You are pushing against mismatch. Matching is quieter than effort. It does not announce itself as progress. It feels like things making sense without explanation. It feels like movement that does not require justification. When you are matched to a timeline, decisions become obvious. Timing feels natural. Resistance drops not because challenges disappear, but because you are no longer misaligned with the direction of movement. This is why chasing outcomes often produces detours. Chasing implies separation. It implies the thing you want is elsewhere. That implication is the signal. The field responds by keeping the outcome elsewhere. Matching implies availability. It implies that what you want is already compatible with who you are being. That signal collapses distance. Effort is often used to compensate for mismatch. When the inner state does not align with the desired experience, effort increases to bridge the gap. But effort cannot change state. It can only exhaust it. Matching changes state first. Once state changes, effort becomes unnecessary or minimal. You can feel when matching is happening. There is less internal negotiation. Less convincing. Less self-correction. You are not trying to become someone else. You are simply allowing a different expression of yourself to stabilize. From that stabilization, new behaviors emerge organically. They do not feel like strategies. They feel like responses. Action as a byproduct is one of the clearest indicators of alignment. When you are matched to a timeline, action arises without force. You find yourself doing things you previously avoided without resistance. You stop overthinking steps because the next step presents itself clearly. This is not motivation. It is coherence. Many people mistake passivity for allowing and effort for engagement. In reality, allowing produces more accurate engagement than forcing ever could. When you are matched, you are not inactive. You are responsive. You are participating in a flow that does not require constant correction. Timelines do not reward hustle. They respond to identity. Identity here is not a story or a label. It is the energetic posture you are consistently holding. When that posture changes, the timeline you are matched to changes automatically. No announcement is made. No threshold is crossed. You simply begin encountering different sequences. This is why dramatic effort is rarely necessary for real change. Change happens when matching occurs. Once matching occurs, the field reorganizes. People, opportunities, and circumstances align without persuasion. The path opens because you are no longer trying to walk where you do not belong. You do not need to figure out how to get there. That question assumes separation. The only relevant question is who you are being now. When that matches what you intend to experience, the timeline is already selected. Everything else follows. Identity is not the story you tell about yourself. It is the frequency you inhabit while the story is being told. Stories change easily. Frequency does not. The field does not respond to the narrative you repeat in your mind. It responds to the posture you consistently hold beneath it. When identity is treated as a story, change becomes exhausting. You try to revise the script, adopt new beliefs, correct old assumptions. But the underlying state remains the same. The field reads the state, not the revision. This is why external circumstances often remain unchanged despite years of inner dialogue. Identity as frequency is simpler and more precise. It is how you stand in the moment. How you breathe. How you respond when nothing is happening. How you relate to uncertainty. These subtle signals form a stable pattern. That pattern is what reality mirrors. Small shifts in being create large external reorganization because the field is sensitive to coherence, not effort. When your posture changes, even slightly, the range of timelines you can match shifts. You do not need a dramatic transformation. You need consistency. The field amplifies consistency. This is why sudden changes sometimes occur after minimal inner adjustment. From the outside, it looks like luck or coincidence. From within the system, it is a frequency match resolving. The timeline reorganizes to reflect the new posture without announcement. Most people try to change identity by adding traits. Be more confident. Be more disciplined. Be more positive. But identity does not expand through addition. It stabilizes through release. When you stop bracing, stop proving, stop defending, the posture changes. And that change is immediately legible to the field. Identity as frequency also explains why pretending does not work. You can act confident while feeling contracted. You can speak abundance while holding scarcity. The field ignores the performance and mirrors the contraction. This is not judgment. It is accuracy. Being is quieter than story. It is not performative. It does not seek validation. It simply exists. And because it exists without contradiction, it becomes a clear signal. Clear signals produce clear responses. You can observe your identity frequency in neutral moments. When you are not trying to achieve anything. When you are waiting. When plans fall through. Do you tighten or soften? Do you rush or settle? These reactions reveal the posture you are actually living from. Changing identity does not require self-improvement. It requires self-honesty. When you notice a posture that no longer fits, you do not need to fix it. You need to stop reinforcing it. The moment you stop reinforcing it, space opens. In that space, a new posture stabilizes naturally. External reorganization follows internal stabilization. People respond differently. Opportunities appear without chasing. Circumstances rearrange without struggle. Not because you force change, but because the field is reflecting a different frequency. Identity is not who you say you are. It is who you are being when nothing is happening. When that changes, everything else does too. Waiting for proof feels reasonable. It feels cautious. It feels intelligent. But waiting for proof is not neutral. It is a selection. Every moment you wait for evidence before shifting, you are choosing to remain matched to the current timeline. Not because the field demands belief, but because resonance always comes first. Proof does not lead alignment. Alignment produces proof. The field cannot show you evidence of a state you are not yet embodying, because evidence is a reflection, not an invitation. When you ask reality to prove something before you align with it, you are asking it to mirror doubt. And it does so faithfully. This is the loop that keeps people suspended. They say they will relax once things improve. They will trust once stability appears. They will commit once certainty arrives. But relaxation, trust, and commitment are the signals that would allow improvement, stability, and certainty to manifest. By withholding them, the old timeline remains coherent. Waiting is not passive. It is active reinforcement of the familiar. It tells the field that the current state is acceptable enough to continue. The field responds by maintaining continuity. Not out of indifference, but out of precision. It mirrors what is being sustained. The idea that proof should come first assumes that reality operates like a test you must pass before engaging. In truth, reality operates like a mirror that reflects engagement itself. When you shift state without evidence, you are not being reckless. You are being coherent. You are broadcasting readiness instead of caution. This does not mean ignoring information or denying circumstance. It means recognizing that circumstance is not the cause of your state. It is the effect. When you wait for circumstance to change before adjusting state, you reverse the order. That reversal keeps the loop intact. Many people fear that aligning without proof means pretending or lying to themselves. But alignment is not pretending. It is choosing a posture. You are not claiming something is already visible. You are stabilizing the state that would make it visible. There is no deception in that. There is only sequence. Proof arrives quietly after resonance stabilizes. Often in ways that feel ordinary. A shift in conversation. A subtle opportunity. A change in timing. These are not dramatic signs. They are confirmations. And they do not arrive while you are watching the mirror impatiently. They arrive when you have stopped checking. The need for proof is rooted in fear of disappointment. But disappointment only occurs when expectation is attached to outcome. Alignment does not require expectation. It requires presence. When you align, you are not demanding a specific result. You are becoming available to a different range of results. Waiting keeps you safe from disappointment, but it also keeps you safe from change. Safety and stagnation share the same posture. The field cannot distinguish between them. It only mirrors what is consistent. When you stop waiting for proof, you are not leaping blindly. You are stepping out of a loop. That step alone alters the timeline. Not because something external has changed, but because the signal has. Proof will follow. It always does. But it follows resonance, not the other way around. You have been relating to timelines as if they exist outside of you, as if you are a person standing in front of multiple doors, trying to choose the correct one. That model feels intuitive, but it is inaccurate. You are not choosing a timeline from the outside. You are the mechanism through which timelines are selected. The shift is subtle but absolute. You are not the observer of the field. You are the point at which the field organizes. The moment this is seen, the subject-object divide collapses. There is no separate reality responding to you later. There is only consciousness meeting itself in different configurations. The field is not an external system evaluating your requests. It is a mirror reflecting your state instantaneously. As long as you identify as a person inside the field, you will try to manage outcomes. You will attempt to choose correctly, avoid mistakes, and optimize results. This creates tension because it places responsibility on effort instead of alignment. But when identity shifts from person to consciousness, the strain dissolves. Consciousness does not choose between timelines. It expresses coherence, and timelines organize around that expression. The field does not ask what you want. It reflects what you are. This is not philosophical. It is mechanical. Consciousness stabilizes into a state, and that state collapses probability into experience. There is no decision-making process the way the mind imagines it. There is only resonance. Seeing yourself as the selector changes how you relate to uncertainty. Uncertainty no longer feels threatening because there is nothing to control. You are not trying to predict the correct future. You are allowing the future to form around a stable center. That center is not a personality. It is awareness itself. This is why effort becomes unnecessary at this level. Effort assumes separation. It assumes you must bridge a gap between here and there. But if you are the selector, there is no gap. There is only signal clarity. When the signal is clear, selection is automatic. The mirror analogy becomes precise here. A mirror does not decide what to reflect. It reflects whatever stands before it. Consciousness functions the same way. When the internal state shifts, the external configuration shifts without negotiation. The mirror does not argue. It does not delay. It does not judge. It reflects. This understanding removes blame as well. You are not being punished for past choices. You are not being rewarded for correct ones. You are witnessing the continuity of a signal. And continuity can be changed at any moment, not by effort, but by recognition. Recognition is what allows the selector to operate consciously. Without recognition, selection still happens, but unconsciously. With recognition, you stop trying to manipulate outcomes and start stabilizing state. The difference is profound. You do not need to figure out which timeline to choose next. That question belongs to the identity of a person navigating an external world. From the position of consciousness, the only relevant movement is internal coherence. When coherence is present, the mirror reflects a corresponding reality. You have never been late. You have never missed a window. You have simply been identifying at the wrong level. The moment identity shifts from person to consciousness, the entire system becomes simple. You are not choosing a timeline. You are the selector. And selection is always happening now. Recognition is not an action you take. It is a shift in seeing that reorganizes everything without effort. This is the part that is often missed. People search for techniques, practices, and systems because they believe change must be caused. But real change is not caused. It is revealed. The moment you truly recognize something, you cannot unsee it. And once it is seen, behavior, perception, and response adjust automatically. There is no discipline required to act on what is obvious. You do not need willpower to step away from something you clearly see no longer fits. You do not need motivation to move toward what you clearly recognize as aligned. Recognition carries its own momentum. This is why doing does not create lasting change. Doing can temporarily override behavior, but it does not alter perception. As long as perception remains the same, effort must be continuously applied. That is exhausting. Recognition ends the need for effort because it changes the frame through which everything is interpreted. Techniques attempt to produce results by repetition. Recognition produces results by clarity. The field responds to clarity instantly. Not because something magical occurs, but because confusion has been removed. When confusion drops away, resistance dissolves. And when resistance dissolves, reorganization is immediate. This reorganization is often subtle at first. It may show up as relief, calm, or a quiet sense of certainty. But internally, the shift is complete. The timeline has already adjusted. The external world follows with a delay not because recognition was partial, but because physical systems reorganize more slowly than perception. Recognition does not require analysis. It does not require processing or understanding in the intellectual sense. It arrives as a simple seeing. A knowing without commentary. When it happens, questions fall away. Not because answers were found, but because the questions no longer apply. This is also why recognition cannot be forced. You cannot decide to recognize something. Recognition happens when resistance is absent. When you stop trying to change, fix, or improve, seeing becomes possible. Effort clouds perception. Allowing clears it. Many people mistake repetition for progress. They repeat affirmations, routines, and habits hoping that quantity will produce quality. But repetition without recognition reinforces the old lens. It strengthens the identity that believes change must be earned. Recognition bypasses that identity entirely. When recognition occurs, identity reorganizes on its own. You do not have to convince yourself you are different. You simply stop relating to yourself in the old way. That shift is enough. The field adjusts because the signal has changed. This is why the most profound changes often feel anticlimactic. There is no drama. No breakthrough story. Just a quiet settling into what was always apparent but not yet seen. And once seen, it is stable. Recognition is immediate because it is not a process. It is a moment. And moments are where all power resides. You do not recognize gradually. You either see, or you don't. And once you see, doing becomes irrelevant. Nothing needs to be added for this to occur. Nothing needs to be practiced. The shift happens when attention relaxes and perception clears. That is all. Recognition is the only real shift because it is the only thing that changes the signal at its source. Everything else is an attempt to manage the reflection. If you are seeing this now, it is not because time is running out. It is because awareness is present. The window you have been sensing does not close when a calendar changes. It closes when consciousness goes dormant. When attention drifts back into habit, urgency, and unconscious repetition, selection continues, but it happens automatically instead of deliberately. This is why the invitation has never been about speed. It has always been about presence. You do not need to rush to choose the right future. Rushing would only recreate the very state that keeps timelines looping. What matters is how gently you inhabit this moment. Gentleness is not hesitation. It is precision without strain. Unconsciousness is not a flaw. It is simply momentum. When patterns run without awareness, they repeat. The field mirrors consistency, not intention. When you are not present, the most familiar signal continues uninterrupted. That is what feels like a window closing. Not because opportunity disappears, but because attention has moved elsewhere. Gentle presence interrupts momentum. It does not fight it. It does not try to correct the past or secure the future. It simply stabilizes awareness now. And now is where selection happens. Always. Choosing gently means you stop treating the future as something fragile that must be handled carefully. It means you stop bracing for consequences and start listening to coherence. When you are gentle, your system relaxes. When your system relaxes, your signal becomes clear. Clear signals reorganize reality without force. There is nothing dramatic required here. No declaration. No ritual. No final decision that locks everything into place. Those ideas belong to the mind's need for certainty. The field responds to something quieter. It responds to steadiness. To the absence of resistance. To awareness resting in itself. The most powerful selection mechanism is not intensity. It is consistency. Gentle presence sustained over time outperforms bursts of effort every time. Not because effort is wrong, but because effort fluctuates. Presence stabilizes. This is why the invitation ends without urgency. You are not being asked to change who you are. You are being asked to notice who you are being. The moment you notice, unconscious selection stops. Conscious selection begins. Nothing else needs to be added. The year ahead does not need to be imagined, controlled, or solved. It needs to be matched. And matching happens naturally when you are not forcing yourself into a state you do not yet embody. Gentleness allows the state to settle on its own. If at any point you forget this, nothing is lost. Awareness can return instantly. The field does not keep score. It mirrors what is present. That is all it has ever done. If this recognition feels steady rather than exciting, that is alignment. If it feels quiet rather than dramatic, that is precision. Let that quiet do the work. And if you know someone who is standing at the same threshold without realizing it yet, subscribe and share this with someone who needs to hear it.